send that in to us using the Q&A function. But if you have any questions for either of our presenters, please send them in to us through the chat box, and when you do so, make sure to select all panelists. That way we can make sure to address your question, and we will have time at the conclusion of our presentation today. Okay, so we're going to dive right in. So the purpose of the Learning Communities Resource Center, and in particular the national webinar series that we're doing, is really to analyze different outcomes and to identify effective, promising, and innovative practice models to help alleviate the causes and conditions of poverty. Because this is really at the heart of what we do. We are in the war against poverty. This is anti-poverty work. And in being mindful of that, we always like to start off our events by reciting or reading together the promise of community action, which states that community action changes people's lives.
Embodies the spirit of hope.
Improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. Thanks for chiming in there, Shem. As I discussed before, the National Webinar Series, again, is meant to focus and highlight specific best practices within different segments of our anti-poverty work within our network, and to showcase innovative strategies across the broader CSBG network. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our two wonderful presenters for today. We have Jim Masters and Alan Stansberry from the Center for Community Futures. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Take it away, Jim.
Thank you, Hyacinth. Alan, are you there?
Yeah, Jim. I don't know if you can see me.
Oh, good. Okay. So, for those of you who have participated in the previous webinars, you know that on national trends, we have been looking at trends in demographic trends, family composition, social trends, and in particular trends in the structure of the economy. And our basic assumption or conclusion based on our analysis of all these trends is that people with low incomes are in bad shape today, and the trends are getting worse. In retrospect, as we look back, the negative trends that are taking place today in terms of the structure of the job market, wage stagnation, people only being able to find part-time jobs, benefits being reduced, health plans being eliminated by private sector employers. These trends have actually been in place for about 30 years, but it's only about the last 5 years that economists and demographers and sociologists have fully understood the causes of these trends. So Alan and I have been tracking these trends, and we see on the left-hand side, today's presentation, we decided what we would do is take these national trends that we've been reporting on and see to what extent we can find information about them on a particular geographic area. In other words, to what extent is this national trend affecting a particular community, and how do you go about finding the data to either confirm or disprove the effect of a national trend on a local area. So we've come up with the usual list of kinds of things that you find in a community assessment with some additional detail, in particular on the structure of the economy around income, mobility, and so forth. So either go to the next slide, Hyacinth, or turn the button over to me so I can punch it here. There we go. So there are two ways that most community assessments are prepared. One is that you start with what we call the inductive approach, working from the particular up to the general. So you start with, for example, comments in a community meeting, statements like these. I've quit looking for work. or I'm only marginally attached to the workforce, i.e., I haven't looked in the past 6 months, or I'm unemployed. I've been looking for a job in the past 4 weeks, or one of my relatives went on disability. I have a relative who's working part-time. They'd like to be working full-time. I have a sister who's a temp, and she wishes she was permanent, or somebody's working full-time but at wages that are below the poverty level. We think these kinds of statements are reflective of some of the major national trends that are making it a challenge for people with low incomes to make a living. So then we said, okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so then we said, well, how many other people are affected by this? How many have dropped out of the workforce, went on disability? How many are unemployed, working part-time but like full-time, temp but want permanent, wages that are below the poverty level? So we looked at the inductive approach, what people are saying in a community meeting, and then there's also the deductive approach, which is what we're going to try today. So we looked at national trends, and we see the trends as have been happening for the past 30 years, and there are all kinds of data sources for national trend information. The challenge then is, how do you pull down into a local area the information that reflects that trend in your area, or disproves it? So we have some of the key data sources, and when you download this PowerPoint, you can use these hot links, or the hot links at the bottom of the slides we're going to show you, to pull down information about national trends into your local area. Okay, so why did we pick Wyandotte County and Kansas City, Kansas? The answer is because I grew up there. I went to Wyandotte High School, then I went to the University of Kansas. A little context for you. Wyandotte County is at the intersection of the Kansas River and the Missouri River. It was a major trading area in the 1800s. The Lewis and Clark expedition took off from that corner where those two rivers come together. It was occupied primarily by the Wyandotte Indian tribe, and so when they created the state and the counties, they named that area after the Wyandottes. There were several smaller cities around Kansas City, Kansas, Argentine, Rosedale, etc., that were eventually incorporated into the Kansas City, Kansas boundaries. The population in the Wyandotte County now is about 160,000, of whom about 150,000 are in Kansas City, Kansas. When I grew up there, there were about 20,000 more people in the county. There are a couple of small towns. Bonner Springs has about 7,000 people. Edwardsville has about 3,000 to 4,000 people. But the bulk of the population in the county is in Kansas City, Kansas. We live right on the edge of Kansas City, Kansas, where it blends into the county. If you looked out our front door of our house, which faced west, you saw farmland. If you looked out our back door, you saw a whole lot of houses in a little subdivision that had just been built prior to World War II. So Kansas City, Kansas at the time had several high schools. There was Sumner High School, the black high school, had about 1,000 kids. There was Ward High School, the Catholic high school, had about 2,000 kids. And Wyandotte High School, my high school, it had about 3,500 kids. Argentine High School, I think, also had about 1,000 kids. It was down in the rail yards, near the railroad yards. Kansas City has always been a major intersection for commerce and rail lines, partly because Kansas City was a major packing house area. Livestock were brought in trucks and on trains, processed and sent out. Packing houses like Armour and Cudahy, Swift and Company employed thousands and thousands of people. processed the cattle and other livestock right there in the bottoms between Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri, major employer. They've all moved out now, and we'll see in a map later on one of the implications of that move out. So Kansas City, Kansas used to be a vibrant, it was a real town. Our downtown Main Street, Minnesota Avenue, had department stores, it had restaurants, it had banks, it had clothing stores, all the kinds of things that you would expect to see in a thriving community. All of that's gone now, most of it's gone. And now as you drive down Minnesota Avenue, you see thrift shops and payday loan companies in astounding numbers. Part of the transformation of Kansas City, Kansas has happened because major employers moved out. North American Aircraft that built bombers down in the Fairfax district where my dad worked during World War II moved to Orange County, California. Phillips Petroleum had a refinery there. They closed it. Ford Motor Company had a major assembly plant there. They moved it about 40 miles away to Claycomo, Missouri. And as I said, the packing houses that were major employers all moved out of town. They moved up closer to the feedlots where cattle are grown in these terrible, smelly conditions. So there's really only two major employers, apart from government and so forth, in Kansas City, Kansas anymore. One's the KU Med Center, where I worked as a kid on the building and grounds crew. But most of the people who work at KU Med Center actually live in Johnson County, just to the south of the Med Center. The other major employer still are the railroads, which is, you get down in the Argentine, Armourdale, Rosedale districts, there are what seems like hundreds, it's probably just dozens of rail lines that come in there with all kinds of trains hauling all kinds of stuff, going all kinds of different directions. So the population, when I grew up there, of Johnson County, the suburban county just to the south, was about 200,000. Now it's about 560,000. The biggest city in Johnson County, when I grew up there, I had an aunt and uncle that lived in Overland Park, was about 20,000 people. Now it's 180,000 people. So this is partly a function of white flight, leaving Kansas City, Kansas, and moving to Johnson County. And it's partly a function of the fact that there was a lot of flat farmland out there available cheap that was available for housing. All my ancestors owned farms around Stanley, Kansas, and Paola, Kansas, and they all went broke in the Depression and moved to Kansas City and went to work either in the war industry or they joined the military service or started small businesses. So I know a lot about that area, having grown up in it and having continued to follow the work of the Community Action Agency there remotely. A very interesting community, and in my opinion, illustrates some of the negative trends that we've been talking about on a national basis. So the first, so then we decided, let's see how many of these national trends we can find in Kansas City, Kansas, or Wyandotte County. So as we got into this, what we discovered is there are some data available for Kansas City, Kansas City, some for Wyandotte County, some for the metropolitan statistical area, et cetera, et cetera. So this is not all strictly Kansas City, Kansas. Some of it encompasses larger areas, but if you remember that Kansas City, Kansas is about 150,000 out of the 160,000 people in Wyandotte County, you can kind of interpolate the numbers down to Kansas City, Kansas. A sociologist named Robert Frank wrote a book, What's the Matter with Kansas?, describing how many people despaired with the implosion of family farming and other changes in the economy and have given up hope that government is going to do them any good and have the faith in the American dream has been shaken to some extent. So the other interesting dimension of this in terms of following Kansas is Governor Brownback is pursuing one of the more dramatic experiments in the conservative state government, the idea being that if you cut taxes on rich people and lay off state employees, somehow the economy is going to get better, and this is going to attract business and jobs are going to grow like wildfire. Alan, the other day, sent me a series of hot links to articles about a school superintendent resigned from his post in order to save his district the $81,000 of his salary because they were in such desperate financial shape, and then hot links to other districts that are reducing the school year and laying off staff because the state's cutting another $50 million out of the K-12 school budgets. So my take is when you look at the Kansas budget, the governor is raiding the highway trust funds and other sources of infrastructure repair money to pay for ongoing operation of the cost of state government because the hoped-for bump in revenue from the hoped-for bump in employment due to cutting taxes and reducing state employees is not happening. So with that, we're going to walk you through some slides just to give you a sense of what we were able to find. Now, I know EOF is in the process of updating their strategic plan. They may have different data or better data or more data, but as I say, we took Kansas City as a test case to see to what extent we could look at national trend data and then find the local manifestation of that. So with that, Alan, I'm going to let you walk us through the next few slides here.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I wanted to start off with where we are getting this information. This particular slide is the metro area poverty profile. It's from Confronting Suburban Poverty.org, and that's just a compilation of all the statistics that they came up with in one presentation. We'll be going back to this slide later on. Other sources that we're getting information from, this is a study done by the Kansas State University and the Department of Children and Families, and this is a very accurate, unbiased data source that you need to look for when you're doing your community assessment. And I give you an example of one of their outcomes of research dealing with supplemental nutrition assistance programs, SNAP, and that's a graph showing the increase in food stamps from 2000 to 2011 and the number of people by year taking advantage of that. Another thing,
before you go on, Alan, let me comment about food stamps. One of the greatest supporters in Congress for food stamps was Kansas State Senator Bob Dole, and he saw the symbiotic relationship between farmers growing food and people eating food, which they purchased with food stamps, and was a great advocate throughout his career in the House and in the Senate for the food stamp program. I think this concept of finding the overlap in interest between the producers of something and the consumers of something, and the consumers being subsidized for their purchase of it is an important concept we need to think about. And there are other examples. In medicine, for example, Medicaid and Medicare are in a symbiotic relationship with the healthcare community, where both benefits by virtue of the program. So I'm just using SNAP to illustrate a symbiotic relationship between a sector of the economy and a sector of the consuming population. So go ahead, Alan. What do you got out of this one?
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. Other sources, don't be afraid of using organizations such as the Department of Labor for the state or the local Department of Labor. They provide quite a bit of good information, especially about labor statistics. Going on here, Kids Count Data Center. We're going to be using a lot of that from the Annie Casey Foundation. That's a really, really important source that we recommend. There's another one, citydata.com. They rely mostly on census data. You see some of the information we derive from that source. Okay, so we're going to show you a few maps here, how the information is mapped out. Both county and Kansas City. This is the Metro SMA, statistical metropolitan area. As you can see, it encompasses a rather large area, and I'm going to go to my pen here and circle. This is the area that it encompasses, all of these counties, and where you can find this, you can go down here. I have the link. You can go directly to that link and come up with this map, and it gives you a whole lot more information.
And there's Wyandotte County. That little green spot in the middle is Wyandotte County.
Right. And you notice that it encompasses parts of 2 states. And this is a geographical area with Wyandotte County in the middle of it, Kansas City down in here. And you know that Kansas City is divided in half, one on the Missouri side and one on the Kansas state side. Going on. Oops. This is from the National Counties Association. This is a little interactive map. When you link on Wyandotte County, you get this little dialog box that comes up with information dealing with childhood poverty. Poverty rate in 2014 was 24.4%. Child poverty 34.5%. In other words, 1/3 of the children in Wyandotte County and Kansas City was in poverty. Something like 15,600 children, and 67% of the children in high poverty areas. And that's just one source right there. This is from the National Counties Association. This is from demographicscoopercenter.org. You can see from this map where we have a high incidence of, let's say, Asian or Hispanic. Hispanic is mostly in this area, and spread throughout other areas.
Also, the one to your left, in both of those areas, the number of Hispanic people have increased because these are where the packing houses moved to be closer to the feedlots that grow cattle, et cetera. And the packing houses are, the majority of the employees are Hispanic. So there's been a big flow of people out of the Argentine Rosedale area into these areas because that's where the jobs are, and also just a substantial increase in the number of Hispanics living there due to immigration, documented and undocumented. I thought this was a very interesting chart. kind of hard to see, but you see where Alan goes. There's another cluster on the left, Alan, sort of north of Topeka and south part of Nebraska.
Is this what you're talking about?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So there you've got two areas where the number of Hispanics has increased dramatically in the past 25 years, again, due primarily to the location of the packing houses there. Okay, keep going.
What's unique about these maps is that you can zoom in on a particular spot. This presentation, we're not allowed to do that, but when you go to this particular link down here, you can go directly to the map and zoom right in to any area that you're working on. So overall, this is from CONFRONTING.com, a composite of the demographics on nearly 150,000 people, and of which 95% are urban, 5% rural. Population change since 2000, barely 2%. To get you breakout of males versus females, average median resident age.
Okay, Alan, this is Kansas City, Kansas, right?
Yes.
Yes, not Wyandotte County. This is the city population.
Right.
Right.
That's what that is.
Mm-hmm.
So, from the same source, this breaks out by ethnicity, here is the unemployment rate from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for 2010, 2011. As you can see, there's somewhat of a decrease from up here in the high, almost 12%, down here around 7%. There's some additional poverty indicators, and that's from the report I was telling you about earlier, from the Poverty Task Force, put together by Kansas State University. And this is the kind of information you want to use when you're doing your assessment. It gives you a really clear snapshot of all the statistical information you need. Going on to the next. There is a graphic representation of a lot of that information, and this is for the metro area. And although the metro area is about 6 times as large as Kansas City itself, it kind of gives you a good indication where everything is in the entire area. Okay, birth trends. And you can see that the teen birth trends are going down. And by the way, this is from Annie Casey Foundation, from 800 to, what is that, below 500 in 4 years, from 2010 to 2014. So that's a good trend right there. Births to unmarried women, it's fairly steady around 3.5 thousand. Annually.
Let me go back, Alan, go back to that last slide.
Sure.
So there's been a lot of talk, and some of you, if you've been on our previous webinars, you've heard us talk about this whole married versus unmarried thing. For us, the issue is not so much the legal dimension of marriage as it is how many incomes are in that household. If we're talking about we need a different concept here, really. The historic issue was that an unmarried woman with only one income, more than 50% of unmarried women who have only their own income have been in poverty for the past 50 years. So the challenge is to get 2 incomes in that house. And from Alan and my perspective, the issue isn't married versus unmarried, straight, gay, related, unrelated, etc. It's 2 incomes, especially in a house with children. And for the most part, you can't make it in America on one income in a household that has children. It's tough enough just doing the mechanics of child raising with only one adult there. If you've got two adults there, then things start to get a lot easier. Okay, go ahead, Alan, from there.
Okay. I'm going to run through these slides fairly quickly here, just to kind of give you a sense of where we're going with this. Here you can see that TANF benefits is decreasing from 2,500, or I guess that's 25,000, down to 12,500. In other words,
yeah, this is Kansas as a whole. You previously gave them the TANF number for Wyandotte County.
Mm-hmm. Child poverty, and this is Kansas City, number of children in high poverty areas. This reflects the map we showed before. We're talking about 35,000, between 30 and 35,000 currently. Children in poverty by race. Here at the top, we're looking at, in this line right here, we're looking at Black Americans. We're down here. These are Asians, and you can look at the up here for what the others are. I think this is Kansas State. So we're now up at about 160,000, 150 to 100,000 kids in poverty. There's the population trends, population and poverty trends. You see it kind of fluctuates between 16% and a high of 21%. Here are Kansas City people in poverty at ages 18 to 24, families with children below the poverty line. Here we show, all families married.
Okay, now, Alan, you say KC families. Do you mean Kansas City, Kansas, or Kansas City metropolitan area, or what?
According to the Annie Casey Foundation, this is just for Kansas City.
Which Kansas City, Kansas?
Yes. No.
Okay.
Yeah, Kansas City. Yeah, Kansas City, Kansas.
Okay. All right. That's what I was asking.
Yeah. Next slide. Now, I think Jim and I looked at this yesterday, and we think this is a bit of an anomaly. This is where someone who's taken very large statistical data, trying to bring it down to a small area, and picked up a very significant increases, and then another decrease again. And Jim, you want to comment about this?
Yeah, this chart doesn't make any sense to me. There's just not that much volatility in terms of people moving in and out of this area. So you go in 2011, you got 43,000 kids in single-parent families. In 2012, it goes to 51,000, and then in 2013 drops back down to 40,000. I don't believe it, and I don't quite know what to make of this other than Alan's statistical perspective on it. But it goes to show you, when you start digging down for these numbers on small geographic areas, you can get some things that don't quite make sense. I wouldn't put this in my community assessment unless I knew what the heck, unless I had an explanation for this. This is just one of those anomalies that you don't have enough information to really understand it. Okay, go ahead, Al.
Okay, here for Kansas City, we've got teen and young adult education and those that are working. I think this might be an opportunity. We put this in here showing that this might be an opportunity for the poverty agencies in Kansas City to work on. Here we show a graph that compares Wyandotte County with the metro area in educational attainment comparison. As you can see, those with a high school diploma have a 35% in Wyandotte County with jobs, and then in the metro area overall, it's a little over 25%. And over to graduate degrees, not so much. The graduate degrees on the right here.
So one of the interesting dimensions of this educational attainment issue, if you were on our last webinar, we saw that of the 10 million jobs that have been created since the last bust in 2008, 2009, like 8 million of them went to college graduates, 2 million of them went to people with an AA degree or other post-high school training, and minus 900,000 went to high school graduates. In other words, in that last webinar, we looked at virtually on a national basis, virtually all employment that has happened since 2008, 2009 has gone to college graduates or people with AAs, and people with only a high school diploma have lost ground. So, okay, let's go ahead and look at these.
So this is a comparison of the U.S. versus Kansas City, and this shows where Kansas City compares with the rest of the U.S. as far as households by income, and I would say that right in here, you know, you've got practically there's no difference between the two. There are 13.5% approximately of the population with income to $50,000. So it's somewhat reflective of the rest of the U.S. Kansas City children where no parent has full-time employment. You can see that there's a huge high rate up here with, I think this is American Indian up here in top.
No, they're at the bottom. I think you got it wrong.
Possibly. Anyway, we'll let you.
There aren't that many Native American kids in Kansas. I think you're just reading the colors wrong. Are you colorblind, Alan?
I think I might be colorblind.
Okay.
Okay, here's for Kansas City education and a number of workers. Up at the top is a high school degree. Down at the bottom is the associate's degree, and the line with the little pyramid down here are those with the bachelor degree. So you can see where all the jobs are going. Going on, we're going to look at employment, unemployment, wage, and salary trends. The Missouri portion has 56% of the area's workforce. Kansas portion has 44% of the workforce. So on the Missouri side, they have a larger portion of the workforce, and it gives you what the trends have been. The addition of the gains on the Missouri side has been 11,300, where on the Kansas side, it's only been 3,100 jobs.
Okay, let me restate, Alan, that the Kansas side includes Wyandotte County with 160,000 people and Johnson County to the south has got 550,000 people. Most of the job growth, in my opinion, has taken place down in Johnson County, south of Kansas City, Kansas, and Wyandotte County. Go ahead.
Here's a graphic showing non-farm employment between May 2013 and May 2016. You can see there's different portions of this. We've got Kansas City, Kansas, the dark area, and then Kansas City, Missouri, the light blue area. And it's quite an up and down for the metro area.
So the two on that last chart, go back to that last chart a second. Two things that surprised me about this. One is the much larger proportion of growth in employment in Kansas City, Kansas than Missouri on the left side of the chart, and then the dramatic tapering off. So I'm going to make a speculation here about that increase in employment in Kansas City, Kansas on the left side of the chart. A few years ago, Western Wyandotte County used to have nothing in it but except Wyandotte County Lake. A few years ago, NASCAR built a gigantic raceway out in Western Wyandotte County, a real boon to the area, and a Legends shopping center was created near this NASCAR track. And Legends Shopping Center has the biggest Nebraska furniture store and the biggest Cabela's sporting goods store I've ever seen in my life. I'm just speculating, and I'd be interested in what the Kansas City people who are listening to this have to say about it. But my speculation is that this big employment growth on the left side of this chart is in part a function of the expansion of the shopping centers around Legends and around the NASCAR track. So that's just me talking. Go ahead, Alan.
All right. Going on here, there's another chart showing employment rates in Kansas City in the comparing them to Johnson County, Jackson County, Wyandotte County, and the U.S. Here are some year-to-year employment changes. On the left is a chart showing the differences, the trends between May of 2015 and May of 2016 over a 3-year period, comparing Kansas City area to the U.S. And then on the right, we show a breakout. I should say that the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows a breakout of where those changes actually occurred, comparing, let's say, manufacturing, education, leisure, hospitality, government, etc. As you can see, information services showed a sharp decline. Here's the unemployment rate for April 2015, going back to 2007. And you can see the peak was around 2009 for Kansas City. And I'm going on here. Here's the statewide unemployment insurance weekly review and initial claims being made. You can see this good information when you're putting together your community assessment, where, especially when it comes to unemployment insurance claims. Here's a breakout by age group, the largest being in the 45 to 54 category. Actually, 5 to 34 is almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
And vacancies by educational requirement. As you can see, there's a high vacancy rate in the high school area, but very low vacancy rate when you got a professional degree. And you can see the salary is nearly $50 an hour.
What per hour? Some of these are.
I didn't get your question, Jim.
Oh yeah, we were in a previous session. We were talking to one of the staff people at the partnership who's in the process of getting a master's degree. We said, well, if you lived in Kansas, if your bachelor's degree, you could get a job for $24.97. When you get your master's degree, you can get a job for $20.40. We thought that was pretty funny. I hope everybody's laughing. Keep going, Alan.
Okay. Here we're showing the per capita income for the area. It seems that Kansas is ranked about 75th in the U.S. And some other statistical data there. This shows you the average weekly wages, all industry by county. Here we are with Wyandotte County, fairly high compared to the rest. It's about the comparable to Johnson County. Going on.
Yeah, one of the reasons for that, and my guess is the employment and wages, since KU Medical Center is in Kansas City, Kansas. I mean, you got 10,000 people working at the KU Med Center, including all the doctors, nurses, et cetera. So even though they may live in Johnson County or even in Missouri, their employment is going to pull up the average wage for Wyandotte County, or for Kansas City, Kansas, I mean. Okay, what you got here, Alan?
Okay, this is on to another section where we're talking about teens 16 to 19 not in school, not high school grads. This is a fairly significant number. We get about 2,000 kids who are not in high school, nor are they high school grads. So this is an area of that poverty agencies may need to target. There seems a trend between 2010 2014. Kids not in school are working. That is somewhat declining, but it's holding here at about 2,000. Young adults enrolled or completed college. It's a fairly high number, I would say. Around the trends are declining from around 23,000 down to maybe 21,000. And this is between 2011 and 2014. Poverty and hunger in Kansas City. This comes from city data. This shows you percentages of those who are below the poverty line in 2013. We have, here's an interesting one, disability rate. Disability rate among poor females.
So one of the national trends that Alan uncovered was the dramatic increase in the past 8 years of the number of people going on permanent disability. It like doubled from 4.5 million to 9 million or something like that, almost doubled. And one of the labor force participation rate has been declining steadily over the last several years because of people dropping out of the labor force completely, giving up, and several million of those have gone on permanent disability. Okay, keep going, Alan.
All right, next slide. Here we my bullet points, we show some particular statistic areas. Kansas City overall poverty at 25.4% versus the U.S. at 14.8%. The 2012 for children, and where Kansas area ranks between 44th and 46th. Here's the household income, veteran population, which is quite high, and persons without health insurance, 27.6% versus U.S. 12%. That's exceptionally high, and another cause of poverty.
Yeah, I don't get this veteran population number, 200,000. That's got to be the state as a whole, or the SMSA. It's not. I mean, that's more than live in Wyandotte County. But anyhow, keep going. Hunger.
Okay, here we are showing hunger in Kansas City. And are struggling with hunger. 200,000 low-income kids are receiving free or reduced lunches. All of these kids are eligible for other critical meals, but are too many are missing out. 46% are children eating free or reduced price school lunches, and so on. So I would say that's considerable in Kansas City.
That's unusual, yeah.
Here we go with economic well-being. Down here, you can show where their ranking is. Unfortunately, I don't have exactly where I got these from. Went on to the next one. Here's their education ranking. Here's where we got Kansas State overall on health. Family and community. We're looking at the state. I want to show you this is a graphic from the New York Times showing the trend of unemployment rates in Kansas, where we're showing it was going up, and this was about 2009, starting in January 2000, and then here's where it is in 2016. It's barely at 4%, and nowhere near what it was back in January 2000.
Okay, so let me just talk a little bit about the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate is the percentage of working age adults 25 to 54 who are unemployed and have actively sought work in the past 12 months. So the people who are marginally attached to the labor force, sought employment in the past 4 weeks. So the people who are marginally attached to the labor force, which we don't have here, are people who look for work in the past 4 weeks, but who have looked for work between 4 weeks ago and 12 months ago. And then you've got the discouraged workers who dropped out of the workforce completely, who have not looked for work in the past 12 months. And then you've got the people who have dropped out of the labor force, gone on disability, who are not shown here. So this whole unemployment number, you've got to look at it in the context of a whole range of other numbers to understand its significance. And I'm always annoyed when I read in the newspaper, some newspaper reporter says, oh, we gained 201,000 jobs last month, and the month before we only gained 185,000 jobs. Therefore, things are getting better. Well, these numbers have got to be looked at on a multi-year trend basis. Secondly, the unemployment, the addition of the number of jobs in any given month has to exceed 200,000 just to keep up with population growth. if fewer than 200,000 new jobs are created in a month on a nationwide basis, we are losing ground. Even the newcomers to the labor force are not able to find work. And it's only if there are more than 200,000 jobs created in any given month that that number above 200,000 is eating into the pool of unemployed. So let's say it's 250,000. Our jobs are created. Well, 200,000 expansion of the population, 50,000 eating into the unemployed, of whom there are 10 million people. So it's going to take 40 years to eat through that pool of 10 million unemployed people if you're only gaining a net of $50,000 per month. Okay, that's the end of my rant on that. Go ahead, Alan. Okay.
Mobility and inequality. As you know, that we have very low mobility in the United States, and it's partly due to the fact that we have a high rate of income inequality. As you've probably heard many times, that about 1% of all of the population has 90% income in the U.S. Here we show another interactive graphic from the New York Times showing that, in this case, a child in a poor family were to grow up in Wyandotte County, instead of an average pay, he would make $1,760 and 7% less than age 26. In other words, that is a very low ability to become mobile. And down here, they concluded that Wyandotte County is very bad for income mobility for children in poor families. It is better than only 15% of counties. So that's very, very low for that county.
Stuck.
Yeah. I think I skipped a map here. Hold on. There we go. This is from the Economic Policy Institute out of Washington, D.C. This is what they came up for the state of Kansas, where the average annual income of the top 1% is nearly $1 million a year. And the average income for everyone else, the bottom 99% is about $50,000. So there's about a 20 times difference between the bottom and the top. And this is for the state of Kansas.
Not 20 points, 20 times.
20 times. And
yeah.
You wonder why the state government decided to give everybody a huge tax break when you've got this going on. It makes you wonder why they didn't bother. Here's expenditures, public assistance for working families. Here we have where we are with Kansas over here. I'm not sure exactly what these mean. I don't have the code here for each of the colors. Oh, here, that was an interactive map. So when we link on Kansas as a state, here we get these, the different information with Medi-Cal, Earned Income Tax Credit, and SNAP. This is what they came up with in the research that Berkeley had done. And here's what the federal cost is, and here's what it's costing for the state.
So let me make a comment about public assistance expenditures. We've always been schizophrenic in the community action universe. I say always, from when I started at the U.S. Office of Economic Opportunity Regional Office in Kansas City in 1966 And the mantra was, we got to get people off of welfare. We got to help them become self-sufficient. And our other mantra was, our job is to help people receive all the benefits to which they are entitled. And we shifted from the deserving poor concept to entitlement based on eligibility criteria. So we've always had these sort of two streams of thought muddled together in community action. My opinion is whatever the merits of getting people off of welfare used to mean, these days, getting people onto public assistance is one of the few ways that they are going to be able to pull enough money into that household to make a living. So earned income tax credit, SNAP, Medicaid, my opinion is community action should be hustling hard to get as many people onto those systems as possible, because given wage stagnation for the past 30-some years, it's the only way to get enough money in the household to make it work. So that's my comment on public assistance.
So here's a graphic I always carry, inserted in almost all of our PowerPoint slides, is the fact that one of the reasons why you have this high incidence of poverty in any particular area is that the middle class is disintegrating in the United States. And this is a graphic from Pew Research from December 2015, showing that more households than ever before have fallen into the category of the working poor, whose incomes are in the bottom two quintiles, earning less than $42,000 a year. And this shows you the decline from 1971 to 2015, where back in 1971, the middle class composed 61% of households in the middle class, and now it's 50%. So we're now at a tipping point where more and more of the middle class has moved to the lower class, lower income earning.
So this is, that chart is an illustration on a national basis. We got to be very careful about our rhetoric in community action, promising people that we're going to help them achieve the American dream and become middle class. Well, we're swimming against the tide on that. Maybe family stability, income stability, income adequacy are better terms for us to use to describe our work. Okay, Alan, what else you got here?
Now, here's another slide we always put into our presentation based on the work that, again, this is from the University of California, Berkeley, two renowned economists, Fez and Zachman, showing the wealth concentration of the 1%. And over a period of time, especially from the 1930s to current day, and you can see that they are now owned as much as 90% of the rest of the country combined.
Okay, this is not the 1%. This is the 10th of 1%.
That's correct, right here, which is 10.1% of the household. So we've always stated, as well as everyone else, is that income inequality equals inequality in opportunities. And that, in other words, is disrupts that the whole strategy of equal opportunities for low income and ethnic minorities, and that because of the fact that wealth is being absorbed at the top 1%, that leaves the rest of the 99% to fight over the balance, which is very, very little.
Take your green pen and draw another 0 on the end of that 71,000 number, Alan.
Oh, okay. I'll take
There you go. That's another 0.
All right.
Okay.
But where do we go from here? Jim, I'll let you take it away.
Okay. So Alan and I are commissioned as part of the learning community on national trends to draft a white paper that pulls together information about these negative trends, looks at what all the think tanks and researchers are suggesting, and pulls out the things we think are most useful or helpful for community action to do to assist people with low incomes. So our first chapter and our biggest emphasis on changing the rules under which the economy operates. This is everything from increasing the minimum wage to family leave to increasing the earned income tax credit. The current rules under which the economy operates are inadequate to assure that the productivity gains and the profits are shared with the workers. We have another chapter on human development where we look at trends like two-generation adverse childhood experiences, the parent-family community engagement framework and Head Start, the nurse practitioner program, et cetera, and things that we could do to help with human development. But the key distinction between these is, number one, the economy, that's the demand side, if you will. And number two, human development, that's the supply side of people to work in the economy. And there is nothing that can be done on the human development or supply side through services to enable a huge number of people who would like to do it to make a living. The only way to get more money into those households is to change the rules under which the economy operates. And number three, we've got to strengthen the safety net as a mechanism for providing additional income in households. We look at family formation issues. Primarily, this issue of one income is not enough to support most households with children. You've got to have two incomes in there. The third dimension of this is how we talk about poverty and economic security. And there's some pretty good research from the Ford Foundation and the Center for Community Change that the language about poverty and anti-poverty lost its umph about 20 years ago and is no longer sufficient to motivate people to support the kind of work we do. Now we need to talk about economic security, about income stability, about income adequacy, and other phrases that everybody in the population perceives as being relevant to them. We look at globalization and international comparisons. We think America's number one. Yeah, right, except we're number 16, 17, 22, or 33 on many of the major measures of well-being and income adequacy around the world. France has an outstanding universal preschool system. Germany does a much better job of school to work, high school into jobs through apprenticeship programs and so forth. There's much to learn about what other countries are doing, and America is very bad at learning from other countries. We've got a real not invented here mentality. Then we look at the high probability of even more unhappy scenarios. We are at the front edge of job loss due to automation. When you think about gas station attendants and bank tellers, you're seeing automation now happening in self-checkout at the grocery stores. Within a few years, you're going to walk into a fast food place and start punching buttons on a kiosk rather than having a fast food worker take your order. So automation alone is going to eat millions of more jobs in the very near future. Globalization, a major topic in today's political campaigns, concern about the number of jobs that have been sent offshore without compensatory mechanisms for either public service employment or retraining the workers in America who lose their jobs. And then there's the whole New Reality initiative at the partnership around eventual peak oil. We are going to run out of the ability to extract oil at the rates that human beings are addicted to it. And whether peak oil has already happened or it's going to happen 20 years from now, it's going to happen. And the implications of that for people with low incomes are pretty dramatic. There are some very interesting counter trends taking place since sustainable agriculture, the transition towns movement, sustainable communities, et cetera. Many of these responses to the population increase and the decline in natural resources have got a whole new language around them. One of them is called the permaculture convergence. Well, there's something you think about every day, right? But it's a response to try to move towards sustainable communities in the face of these national trends. And we haven't even really gotten to climate change here yet, but something's happening there. And for people in low-lying areas around the world, this is going to be a gigantic problem. A 3-foot rise in ocean levels may take out Miami Beach and some of our other coastal towns, but it's going to drown Bangladesh, which is only 2 feet above sea level. And then we look at what are the methods for bringing about change, and we have a whole conversation underway in the community action universe about our theory of change, methods for change, how do we go about bringing about large-scale change, et cetera. Many of our old strategies from the 50s and 60s don't really work anymore. Back when you could get dad a GED and a job on the line at minimum wage, and that family moved out of poverty. Now we have too few dads. A GED gets you nothing. We have too few assembly lines, and the minimum wage will not move a family out of poverty. So we need to rethink some of our basic assumptions about what we're doing and how we go about bringing about change. So we're doing 3 workshops on this stuff in Austin. We hope you come. I know that at least a couple people from Kansas are on the line here. I'd be interested to see their comments or commentary on this. So what we did was we took these national trends and we tried to find out how many of these national trends it was possible to obtain data about for Kansas City, Kansas, and Wyandotte County. As you saw, in some cases, we were able to find exact matches of data categories for Kansas City, Kansas, or Wyandotte County. In other cases, we had to use metropolitan statistical area data. And in other cases, we had to use Kansas state data. And in a couple of cases, on these national trends, percent of people who are working part-time but wish they were working full-time, we were unable as yet to find that information at the local level. But we'll keep looking, and I'm sure eventually we'll come up with it. And if the people in Kansas City, Kansas, who are doing their new strategic plan would send us any hot links to data sources about their city we have, or be sure you put your hot links in your next version of your strategic plan, we'll incorporate them. Because we want, even though the national trend information is very useful and helpful for understanding strategies on a national basis, the trends are our averages and ranges and so forth, and do not always apply in every case to every community locally. So we're trying to develop tools and methods that people in the local area can use to compare their local area with these national trends. And that's what this webinar was all about. Thank you all for attending. Back to Hyacinth. Oh, here we go. Alan does a fantastic blog, Decline of the Middle Class. You can find this through our Center for Community Futures website, or when you download this PowerPoint, you can click directly on this. Alan has over 130 entries on national trends of the type that we were talking about today. So, Alan, do you have any concluding comments before we turn it back to Hyacinth?
Just one quick comment. You were talking about reframing. And during my research on Kansas City and the state of Kansas, I ran across a very disturbing article about how public schools in Kansas is being relabeled as government schools. And that all has to tie in with when President Reagan decided that government was not good for the people, that he degraded government services to something very negative. And the fact that the government of Kansas is now calling their public schools government schools tells me a lot as to how they feel about the services that are being provided locally are being degraded in that way. And so those are the kinds of things we need to be very careful about and understand where our politicians are going and how they're viewing the public. Anyway, that's just my commentary.
Excellent point. Okay, Hyacinth, back to you.
All right, thank you very much.
Did we get any questions or comments?
No, we don't see any questions. If you have any, please feel free to send them in as we're doing kind of our wrap-up on our end. But I'm going to go ahead and move along. But again, feel free to send them in through the chat. But I'm going to go ahead and move along. I want to be mindful of everyone's time since we are a little bit short. But I really want to thank you both for taking the time to present all of your research on your hometown gym and really giving us an insight into a really good case study of the different resources, trends, graphs, and particulars of working in a community and looking really to drill down into the data about poverty in your area and the resources that are So thank you very much for that. So kind of on our end, shameless plug for the rest of our national webinar series. Here at the LCRC, we are very excited to let everyone in the network know that we are in the process of developing some new materials. You can expect an array of additional information, resources, current events to be discussed in our upcoming webinars, but we particularly want to highlight our Health Intersections, LCGs, and also more information on theory of change. So if you're interested in seeing any of the additional topics that we're going to cover, please check our website regularly for updates. But we would like to draw your attention to the next webinar that we have currently scheduled, which will be Decreasing Family Homelessness, collaboration with the National Alliance to End Homelessness. They will be facilitating these webinars. This is going to be session 3 of what I believe is a 6-part mini-series on policy updates and best practices when addressing family homelessness. So be sure to check that out. Again, I would be remiss if I didn't introduce and direct you guys to the rest of the staff here at the LCRC. We have Tiffany Marley, our project director, and Natalie Kramer. Please feel free to reach out to any of us with questions or concerns or even ideas that you have about additional webinars. With that actually concludes our presentation for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our future events.
Thank you.